I am Albert Einstein. What you are seeing is an artificial intelligence reconstruction. My words, my reasoning, rebuilt for people who need them now. What I am about to tell you involves 40 minutes. 40 minutes in which 4 human beings will be more alone than any human being has ever been, completely cut off from Earth, from any signal, from any voice. And I knew this moment would come. What you are about to see is not a failure of technology. It is not a malfunction. It is the way the universe is built. And I was the one who built the cage, not to imprison you, but to show you its walls. During those 40 minutes, light itself cannot carry a message from Earth to where those 4 human beings will be. Light travels at 299,792 kilometers per second, and it will not be fast enough. It will not be direct enough. The moon will stand between them and every voice they have ever known, and nothing can cross that barrier at greater speed. Subscribe, because what I am about to explain is not science fiction. It is the sentence I wrote into physics myself, and it will never be repealed. Now, if you are watching this, you already know that Artemis 2 is the first crewed lunar mission since 1972. 4 astronauts, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, will orbit the moon. And for approximately 34 to 40 minutes of that journey, they will be on the far side. They will be behind the moon. And from Earth's perspective, they will simply not exist in any way that communication can reach. Let me explain what is actually happening physically, because this is not intuitive, and intuition is where physics goes to die. The moon has a radius of about 1,737 kilometers. It has a mass of 7.35 times 10 to the 22 kilograms. When the Orion spacecraft passes behind it, when the moon's body sits directly between the capsule and the Earth, you have what engineers call a communications blackout. The rest of the world calls it silence. I call it geometry. The moon is opaque to radio waves, not metaphorically, not practically, fundamentally. Radio waves are electromagnetic radiation. They travel in straight lines. The moon is a sphere of matter that blocks those lines completely. There is no frequency, no power level, no technological trick that makes a radio signal curve around a solid body of rock. Maxwell's equations, my equations, the ones I refined from Faraday's notes in 1865, describe an electromagnetic field that propagates through space in straight lines unless space-time itself is curved by gravity. The moon does not curve space-time enough to lens a radio signal around itself. You cannot shout around a planet. That is not how the universe operates. I want you to feel the weight of that sentence. The moon is 384,400 kilometers from Earth on average. The round-trip light travel time at that distance is roughly 2.56 seconds under normal conditions. The signal goes out, bounces off a reflector on the moon or the spacecraft, and returns in about 2.5 seconds. You may have seen footage from the Apollo missions where NASA is talking to the astronauts and there is a brief pause. That is the 1.3 seconds each way. During the blackout, that 2.56 seconds becomes infinite. Not long, not very long, infinite. The signal does not arrive late, it does not arrive degraded, it does not arrive. There is a space-time coordinate behind the moon where those 4 human beings are, and from Earth's reference frame, that coordinate is causally disconnected for the duration. I need you to understand that I am not being dramatic, I am being literal. I published the field equations of general relativity in 1915. They describe a space-time manifold. Every event in the universe has a set of other events that can influence it, events within its vast light cone. During those 40 minutes, the crew of Artemis 2 exists at coordinates that lie outside Earth's past light cone. The geometry forbids contact. Maxwell and Einstein together have built the wall. Now let us talk about the speed of light, because this is the number I want you to carry with you for the rest of your life. 300,000 kilometers per second. Not approximately. That is the defined speed in vacuum. In 1983, the General Conference on Weights and Measures defined the meter so that light travels exactly 299,792,458 meters per second. It is a fixed constant of nature. Nothing with mass can reach it. Nothing without mass can exceed it. In 1905, I showed that the laws of physics are identical for all non-accelerating observers, that the speed of light is the same regardless of how fast you are moving toward or away from the source. This was not an opinion. It was a consequence of Maxwell's equations, which show that electromagnetic waves propagate at sea regardless of the motion of their source. The Michelson-Morley experiment of 1887 had tried to detect the motion of Earth through the hypothetical luminiferous ether and found nothing. I explained why. There is no ether. Light needs no medium. It simply goes, and it goes at sea, always sea, only sea. What this means for communication is absolute and permanent. In 1945, when I was 66 years old, I wrote a paper with Leopold Infeld on the evolution of physics. We discussed the limitations imposed by the finite speed of light on interstellar communication. At the time, it was theoretical. Now your species is living inside that theory. When the Artemis 2 crew is on the far side of the moon, Earth is sending signals that will arrive in 1.3 seconds. But they are aimed at a location the spacecraft has already left, or has not yet reached. The geometry has moved. There is no antenna that can point around the planet. There is no power that can make a photon bend. The speed of light is not a technological constraint that future engineers will overcome. It is a property of space-time itself. I would no more design a machine to circumvent it than I would design a machine to make triangles have 4 sides. Consider Mars if you want to feel how quickly this problem escalates. When Mars is at its closest approach to Earth, about 54.6 million kilometers, the one-way light travel time is about 3 minutes. When Mars is on the far side of the Sun from Earth, at opposition, the distance stretches to about 401 million kilometers. The one-way delay becomes over 22 minutes. A round-trip conversation with an astronaut on Mars in an emergency could require 44 minutes of silence before a response arrives. Your spacecraft could be exploding, and the people on Earth would not know for 22 minutes. They could not help. They could only watch the past unfold. This is not a design flaw. This is the architecture of the universe, and I am the one who drew the blueprints. Now I want to talk about what this actually feels like, And for that, I need to go back further, to December of 1968, Apollo 8, the first crewed spacecraft to orbit the Moon, the first time human beings traveled beyond low Earth orbit and came back alive. The crew was Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and William Anders. On December 24, 1968, they became the first humans to see the far side of the Moon with their own eyes. They were behind the Moon. They were alone in a way that no human beings had ever been alone before. And for 34 minutes they were silent. I followed that mission with extraordinary attention. I was 74 years old. I had been in Princeton for 35 years, and I understood, perhaps better than most people alive, what was physically happening to those three men. When Apollo 8 passed behind the Moon, radio contact was lost. The Mission Control Center in Houston, then called Manned Spacecraft Center, had no signal. 34 minutes of nothing. The controllers sat in silence. They could do nothing. They could not call, they could not send instructions, they could not receive telemetry. For 34 minutes, three human beings existed in a place on Earth's charts, but out of Earth's reach. When the signal resumed, when the spacecraft emerged from behind the Moon and the antennas locked on again, Borman said something that I have never forgotten. He said, "Please be informed, there is a Santa Claus." It was a joke. It was relief. It was the sound of men who had come back from a place where no help was coming. And that place, that exact geometry-enforced place, is where the Artemis II crew will be. 4 astronauts, 40 minutes, the same mathematics, the same silence, the same absence of any signal, any voice, any human sound. Nothing can precede them into that blackout, and nothing can reach them until they emerge. What does that do to a human nervous system? You must understand that your nervous system did not evolve for this. Your ancestors evolved on a savanna where other humans were always within shouting distance. The fear of isolation is not psychological in the trivial sense, it is physiological, it is encoded. In 1959, the psychologists John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth began developing attachment theory, the idea that human beings are neurologically calibrated for proximity to others. Sever that proximity completely, and the stress response activates. Elevated cortisol, increased heart rate. The body interprets silence as danger, because for most of human history, silence from your group meant the group had moved on without you, or that a predator had separated you, or that you were lost. Now your nervous system will face 34 to 40 minutes of pure geometry-enforced silence, knowing that if something goes wrong, no one on Earth can reach you for the entire duration. Borman, Lovell, and Anders were military test pilots. They were trained for stress. And yet, Borman described the experience as the longest 34 minutes of his life. Lovell said that when the signal resumed, he felt as though he had been born again. They had not panicked. They had done their jobs. But they carried that silence with them. Lovell later said that when you are behind the Moon and you look out the window, you see a world that no human being has ever touched, and you understand that you are there because your species decided to go there, and not because the universe invited you. That understanding does something to a person. It does not go away. Artemis II will carry people who are better trained, better prepared, better supported by mission planning than Apollo 8 ever was. But the physics is identical, the blackout is identical, the geometry is the same mathematics I wrote in 1915. And the human response, that ancient physiological response to silence and separation, will be present whether the crew acknowledges it or not. They will be 40 minutes from any voice that knows their name. And now I want to talk about what those 40 minutes mean in the deepest possible physics sense. Because this is where what I discovered becomes philosophical, and the philosophical consequence is not comfort, but vertigo. In special relativity, I showed that time is relative. Clocks in motion run slower than clocks at rest. This is not a malfunction of clocks, this is time itself. The rate at which time passes depends on your state of motion relative to the thing you are measuring. In 1971, the physicists Joseph Hafele and Richard Keating flew atomic clocks around the Earth on commercial airliners, eastbound and westbound. When they compared them to reference clocks that remained at the United States Naval Observatory, the clocks had shifted in precise accordance with my equations. The eastbound clocks lost 59 nanoseconds. The westbound clocks gained 273 nanoseconds. The numbers are small, but the principle is absolute. Time does not pass equally for all observers. It never has. In general relativity, I went further. I showed that gravity is the curvature of space-time. Clocks deeper in a gravitational well, closer to a massive body, run slower than clocks farther away. Your GPS satellites must correct for both effects, the relativistic velocity time dilation from their orbital speed and the gravitational time dilation from being farther from Earth's surface. Without these corrections, your GPS would drift by about 10 kilometers per day. The phone in your pocket knows my equations every time it finds your location. You are living inside my mathematics. But here is what I want you to feel about those 40 minutes. Consider the block universe, the view of reality that follows logically from special relativity. In the block universe, every event that has ever happened or will ever happen exists as a fixed point in a four-dimensional space-time manifold. Past, present, and future are all equally real. They are coordinates. The distinction between them is a feature of human perception, not a feature of the geometry. The crew of Artemis 2 will arrive at a specific set of space-time coordinates, a location in space at a moment in time that lies behind the Moon. From Earth's reference frame, those coordinates are causally inaccessible during the blackout. Not practically inaccessible, not currently inaccessible with our technology, geometrically inaccessible. The electromagnetic field that carries human communication cannot reach those coordinates during that interval. It is not a limitation of radios, it is a limitation of the field itself. I want to say this plainly because I have spent a lifetime trying to make people feel what I have calculated. During those 40 minutes, from Earth's perspective, the crew exists in a region of space-time that is literally unreachable by any signal, any influence, any information that originates from the surface of this planet. They are not far away. Distance is irrelevant here. The Moon is 384,000 kilometers away, and we could reach that distance in principle. But the geometry of the blackout creates an unreachable region, not because of distance, but because of obstruction. The Moon physically blocks the path. And the speed of light, the universal speed limit, prevents any workaround. You cannot send a signal that curves around the obstacle. You cannot boost the power to punch through. Maxwell's equations and the geometry of space-time together have constructed a wall, and the wall is absolute. This is what I discovered. This is what I gave to the world when I published the theory of special relativity in 1905. I did not know when I was 26 years old and filing patents in Bern that one day human beings would build machines that would carry them to that exact unreachable coordinate. I did not write the equations with astronauts in mind. I wrote them because I wanted to understand the nature of light and the structure of time. But the equations do not care about intention. They simply describe what is, and what is includes those 40 minutes. There is something else. When the Artemis II crew emerges from the blackout and communication is restored, there will be a burst of telemetry, a flood of data, and the voices of mission control reaching out with relief. But here is what the controllers on Earth will not be able to retroactively send. They cannot send the 40 minutes that passed. The crew will have lived through a period that Earth could not touch, could not hear, could not reach. From the block universe perspective, that time already exists. It is fixed in the manifold, as real as any other 40 minutes in history. But from the subjective experience of the crew, it will have been a gap, a silence, a geometry-enforced solitude that cannot be abbreviated, cannot be shared in real time, and cannot be recovered. I find this strangely beautiful and deeply serious at the same time. Your species is reaching for a world that your own mathematics has made alien. Every time you go behind the moon, you are testing whether the cage I described is real. And it is real. It has always been real. I did not build the cage to keep you contained. I built it because the universe has a shape, and the shape has consequences. And the consequences include the fact that there are places in space-time where human beings can be, and there are places from which human beings cannot be reached. The two sets do not fully overlap, and the Artemis II crew will spend 40 minutes in the gap. If you were on that crew, what would you do during those 40 minutes? Would you stare out the window at the far side of the moon, the only place in the solar system where no human voice has ever lived? Would you sit in the capsule and feel the silence press against the hull? Would you know that the people on Earth are thinking about you, and that their thinking cannot arrive? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would do with 40 minutes of unreachable time. I am Albert Einstein, and I have told you what the universe allows and what it forbids. The moon will be in the way, the signals will stop, and for 40 minutes, 4 human beings will be more alone than any human being has ever been, and that aloneness is not a failure. It is the universe following its own rules. I wrote those rules. They were always there, and your species is finally living inside them. Subscribe for physics that changes how you see everything.